Welcome. Now I'm going to give you the instructions, the actual instructions and explanation of this 2-bucket assignment. And it goes like this. You'll access this assignment online and you'll complete a form. So the instructions start out by saying, complete the requested sections using the characters, settings, sights, sounds, and plot of a common children's fairy tale. Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, one of those. I don't probably need to give you links, but I'll see if I can provide some links. But most everybody knows some common children's fairy tale. Those two, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, are great ones. But if you know of another one and you think it fits, that would be great. So you're going to do that. The goal of this approach is to heighten contrast or conflict into 2 buckets of specific images, sounds, actions, and locations. These 2 buckets could be used to create a shot list for a crew to use to film the story. Now here's why I made this assignment and why I've worked, and this has worked very well over the years with my students. When you ask students to come up with an idea for a fiction, a scene, a movie, a documentary, generally people are searching for that one cool thing, that one cool person. They're thinking, again, that story is made up of one thing, one special thing. Or if you ask them if they're smart enough to know, no, all stories are about either conflict or contrast, then they'll be looking for that one special conflict or contrast. And they'll be racing ahead of themselves. And this process makes the creator step backwards and do the fundamental two-ness work that will really fuel things forward. And the reason I use the word buckets is because I want to make this really clear and really simple. There's nothing, don't get hung up in sentences, don't get hung up in wording. Imagine this is like you're going down on the beach and you've been given a very simple assignment. Here's a bucket A, here's a bucket B, and in A you're going to put shells, and B you're going to put rocks. And just walk along the beach and collect rocks and shells and put them in the right buckets. That's a really simple thing. Your mind can focus on this simple action, and the result, seemingly mundane, will actually be raising up the conflict and the specificity and the embodied physicality. I want you to be specific and physical. Remember to be specific and physical. Generalities are your enemy. So nowhere in this outline should you use a typical this or typical that, a regular this, a regular that. That's the death to most stories. I know you may hear that language in stories, and I can prove to you wherever it shows up that the thing that they're talking about is anything but typical or anything but ordinary. So your grade actually will depend upon how much you meet my standards for being specific by raising the conflict and the contrast. And I'm asking you to use your imagination. These stories don't have built into them. You're not simply scanning these stories and then plucking what's there. I want you to read into them. So I need you to use your imagination to embellish. You probably can't make a mistake if you go off the deep end in terms of embellishment and in terms of specificity. You will fail if you're just too general and you just take what literally is there and you don't really do much with it. By the way, this whole process that I'm talking about here is based on what writers and producers and groups of writers do when they're developing a media piece. So the first thing you're going to fill in is you're going to start at the climax. Now I know I told you in a previous lecture that's a big mistake, people trying to start at the climax, but I know the nature of people's thinking, so let's do that. Let's get that out of the way. Or what you think it is out of the way. So start at the climax. So if it's the story of Cinderella, what's the climax of Cinderella? Now think about which is the climax, right? Because there are a number of important moments and turning points, but what's the climax? Or Little Red Riding Hood, what's the climax of that story? Usually climaxes for these stories happens kind of near the end or not too far from the end. So think about that. Why am I asking you to state this climax so carefully? Because I want to draw you need to, and I want you to draw your imagination in to begin to evoke the drama. You're creating headspace. Remember, as a creator, much of what you do is about these tricks you play on your mind to get you into that space and to get your imagination primed so it starts making up stuff that you wouldn't have thought of if you hadn't have put your mind into that space. So the first thing is we're going to deal with the protagonist. Now, I'm going to go through all of these things, questions having to do with the protagonist, and then I'll just assume you'll use the same sort of instructions for the antagonist. And they're listed there, and you'll have to fill them out as you go through the form. So first, I want you to pre-visualize your protagonist. And this may seem gratuitous and it may seem unnecessary, but you have to do this. By pushing your mind and imagination to see and to fill in details, to create them, you know, they don't exist there, to create those details will cause your brain to orient towards that particular idea, thing, person. And that's what we're having to do, is we're having to carefully push our imagination forward into really making this real in our heads, right? So you're going to list items, a minimum of 6, that describe your main character physically and reveal your main character psychologically. Be specific. Use your imagination. You're going to make stuff up. That's okay. Next, character type. Describe your character as a specific, vivid type. You may use stereotypes as a basis, but you must be more specific. So watch out. If you just use a stereotype, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to add a little bit more about that to make it a real specific kind of stereotype. And I need you to use your imagination on this one. 3, the next one, what does your character want? So I'm imagining once you have described your character physically and you've given them a type, at this point, you now really can be, you have spent enough time loading the character into your imagination that you are capable of beginning to sort of feel what it is that they're motivated by. What do they want? And I need 2 sentences that identify the wider emotional, sort of symbolic desire of your character, like, you know, their sort of broad sort of psychological drive. And then what's the very specific thing that your character needs, wants, is going after in that particular story? And that might change throughout the story. So you might have to put a couple of things in. But what does your character want? Many of these stories actually have only one thing. I don't want to tell you which they are, but that's easy. But it's terribly important that you write them down and that you indicate those. Once you've done that, you can, then you will do the same thing for the antagonist, right? same list of things, very specific. And once you've loaded both of those 2 things and you've filled out both of those, the protagonist and the antagonist, you'll get to a point where you really have embraced you've taken a good full step backwards. You've embraced what is the potential for conflict between these 2 characters based on their different wants, their different physicalities, their different types. Then you can make the next step, which is to start filling your bucket, is one way of referring to this. So this is not a big leap. It's just one step further, and this is where you begin to think like in this case, maybe like a filmmaker, right? So you're going to list the important physical details, 5 minimum, that your film crew, your imaginary film crew, will shoot that will reveal your protagonist's character. So go back and look at the other stuff that you wrote, and now see it through the eye of a camera, through the lens of a camera, and write down what those things are that you're going to shoot. You're not, in this case, these are important physical details. And then after you do that, then I want you to go and do 5 more things, which are important specific actions that this character performs. So you have to be specific and use your imagination in this case. These are actions that your film crew will shoot of your antagonist that articulates the antagonist's general and specific desires. So you can have these 10 things. They're practically a shot list. You could say to a film crew, go out, get these. This is going to tell the story, or at least the antagonist, the protagonist part of the story, and then go and do the same thing with the antagonist. So you'll see in the form there, you'll be going through the protagonist, then you'll do the antagonist bucket list. And then you're done. What you will have done then is you will have driven yourself through discipline to unleash your imagination, I hope. I hope you discover things, you make up stuff, that specifics and images and stuff that you didn't have when you started out. That is really the point of all this. The point of this whole thing is to enrich your imagination about this story, to get at the guts of this story, which is the conflict, the embodiment, and the specificity of that. And from here, you've done something that will put you in good standing, whether it be to now write a screenplay or to produce a shot list, or even to go and get some money. Because when you're trying to give people that elevator pitch, you know, that 3 minutes, or whatever it is that they say you get to sell somebody with an idea, that's what you need. You need to be able to put it all into this conflict between two characters or elements that is specific and that is embodied. And that's what you're driving for with an exercise like this. So use your imagination. Go there. Make stuff up. Be disciplined to be specific. And think in terms of physicality. That is how we tell stories with media. Do those things, finish this assignment, and then we'll be able to share them and look at them and get a good sense of these things. All right, good luck.